to How to Prepare for Show Success, the second of a two-part webinar series designed specifically for exhibitors of the Restaurants Canada show. At this time, I would like to introduce our presenter, Barry Siskind, an internationally recognized expert in trade and consumer shows, who will lead the webinar. Barry, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody, and welcome. We're getting pretty close to showtime, and I know it's an exciting time for everybody, and there's a lot of activity and thoughts about what you're going to accomplish. A couple of weeks ago, we had an opportunity to talk about some of the planning issues, and I hope that I was able to put some of you on the right track. This webinar, that today's, is all about the actual people who are working at the booth. All that good planning stuff, putting the booth together and bringing the right products and all of that kind of stuff, is all important, and it makes an incredible amount of sense, but the real value of a show comes from the human resources. It's the actual people who are there working at the booth who can make the difference between success and failure. And so what today is all about you who are either sitting around a boardroom table and listening to this. What I want to do is to go through some things that I know are going to help you deal with the show in a more effective manner. Now, before I start, I just want to say that my comments today are directed to you whether or not you've been doing Restaurants Canada for like a million years and you know the show inside out, or whether you're a newbie and this is your very, very first time at the show. What's really interesting is that going to shows like Restaurants Canada, it's not the same year after year after year. I've been fortunate to be in the exhibition business for like 3 decades now, and I have seen such massive changes in the industry. And one of the biggest changes is in the demographics and the outlook and the perspective of the visitors who come to the show. The Restaurants Canada visitors are different now than they were 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years ago. It's a different group of people. They have different expectations. And what all of that means to you, who are actually going to be there at the booth, is you've got to be prepared in a different way, a way never before needed, but it's certainly needed now. So here's the agenda. Here's what I'd like to go through with you. I'd like to invite you to take some notes. I'd like you to write down anything that's important for you. This webinar will be recorded and will be available on the Restaurants Canada website. So if you want to go back and review anything, please feel free to do that. But I want to talk to you about working a show. Why is working a show different than what you might normally do outside of a show when you meet people face to face? And then what I'd like to do is I want to show you some very specific skills. I want to show you the skills of actually approaching strangers. And what we're going to talk about is not only how to do it, but how to develop the right kind of attitude. So what we're doing when we approach strangers is not scaring them off, but in fact, engaging them in a reasonable conversation. I want to talk to you about gathering and recording of information. I want to talk to you quickly about making a presentation, like what do you actually tell these people? And this is interesting because a lot of you, and I say you sort of in the generic terms because I go to a lot of different shows, but a lot of booth people tell people simply too much. So we're going to talk about that. What's the right amount to tell people? And then we want to talk about disengaging, like how do you actually get out of the conversation politely, professionally, and be able to move on and talk to somebody else. Because the sheer beauty of the Restaurants Canada show is your ability to engage in conversation with as many people as you possibly can. So that's where we're going to go. Now, in the right-hand corner of your screen is a chat box. And so what I'd like to do is, I often will forget and I don't wait till the end of the webinar and go, okay, are there any questions? But if you have any questions along the way, please just type them in and I will deal with them as quickly as I possibly can. If I don't get to the questions, then I'll give you a way to get those questions answered afterwards. But for heaven's sakes, don't wait until the webinar is over to ask your questions. Ask them along the way, because I really want to make sure that what I'm saying is relevant to you and that you can take this information and actually improve your confidence level in your ability to be able to handle the stress of Restaurants Canada differently than you've ever done before. And my promise is, when you can do that, the results you will see will be amazing, absolutely amazing. So are you ready? Let's get going. All right, so why is it different? And the answer is that, very simply, you have too many people and too little time. Time and space are huge issues for you. You know, we got thousands of people coming to Restaurants Canada. We've got a space, and I know some of you are in a 10 by 10, some of you are in a much larger exhibit, but the reality is that exhibit, no matter how big it is still enclosed. It's a relatively small space filled with machinery and samples and products and services and signs and graphics and all kinds of stuff. And so what you will have is, certainly sometimes when the show seems a little bit slow, that's just traditional trade show stuff. I mean, you know, no traffic pattern is even. So sometimes things will be a little slow and it'll be a little less hassle for you, but sometimes you're just going to be worked off your feet. Some of you may actually have people standing in line waiting to talk to you. Too many people with too little time. How do you deal with all those people in such a short period of time? And time is your major enemy at a trade show. This is different than what you do with people normally in a non-show environment. Totally different than that. You know, when you're out making a sales call and you sit down with a client, you're sitting in their office. The sales call may take an hour. You've got time to chat, you've got time to schmooze, you've got time to, you know, to deal with the issues that they're dealing with. You've got time to present products and services. When you come to Restaurants Canada, that time is now shrunk to about 5 or 6 minutes. And it means you've got to do an awful lot in a very, very short period of time. So when these people leave your booth, they're going to go, yes, that's a company that we ought to be dealing with. Too many people, too little time. So let's start right from the very beginning. How do you actually break the ice? How do you actually engage people, knowing full well that the obstacle you're dealing with is time? How do we engage them in a conversation that's meaningful? And what's really interesting in today's world is that visitors to a trade show want to be engaged. You know, very, very few people want to be passively sold to. Now, think about your own situation. You know, like if you have walked a show, whether it's, you know, Restaurants Canada or any other show, it could be completely unrelated to what you do in your career. But when you walk a show, how many of you want to walk up to some person working in a booth and just be inundated with product information? Probably none of you, because you don't care, because you probably already know it because you've looked it up on the internet if it's a product or service you're already interested in. And so what we really want to do is, the buyer of this year, 2015, doesn't want to be sold. What they want to do is they want to be engaged in the process of making decisions. They want to be engaged in the process of finding good solutions that will work for them and for their organizations. Engagement is a proactive conversation between two people, where two people are talking and sharing information. And it all starts when you break the ice with them. So how do we break the ice? Well, the answer is, you've got a choice. The choice is, you can be proactive or you can be reactive. Now, I'm assuming, okay, that you've all walked a show, and like I said before, it doesn't have to be Restaurants Canada or a restaurant-related show, but any show, you know, even something you've done, you know, like you've gone to the home show, you know, and I'm sure you've walked by people's booths and you ever seen this one? In the background, you see 3 or 4 booth people having this conversation with each other. You ever see that going on? It's called the exhibitor huddle. And so when you see an exhibitor huddle, you actually walking into that booth and breaking up the huddle can be incredibly intimidating. Incredibly. So one of the things you need to think about is, am I going to wait for people to come to me? Am I going to chat with my colleagues while I'm waiting? Or am I going to get out there and actually engage them in a conversation? And the answer is the latter. You've got to be reactive. Or you got to be proactive. That's the way this thing works. You got to get out there and you got to get their attention and you got to get them into a conversation. Okay? Now, what that means is that you need to have the right proactive attitude. Now, here, I've got a question for you. Do you know, and this is not just in the hotel and restaurants business, it's exhibitions worldwide. Do you know what the #1 complaint that visitors have about trade shows? The #1 complaint. Just think about it for a sec. Well, let me tell you the answer. The #1 complaint that visitors have, and this is universal, are pushy salespeople. They don't want to be sold. That's the #1 thing they complain about, is people are being too aggressive with them. So when I'm telling you to be proactive, what I'd like you to think about is, what is the right proactive attitude? And the right proactive attitude, knowing that most of the people don't want to be sold, is the attitude of a host. A host. It's different. Here's your place of business for a few days. And what you want to do is you want to get out there and invite people to come on into your office, come on into your showroom, which is your exhibit at Restaurants Canada. And so, in my opinion, the right proactive approach involves the right attitude, which is the attitude of a host. Now, some of you who are listening to this webinar are not salespeople. And you will still be at Restaurants Canada. And if you're wondering about your role, this makes it really easy for you. You don't have to sell anything. All you have to do is welcome people to your place of business. Be a host. Just welcome them, get them into a conversation. As long as you're doing that, everything else is going to fall into place. Okay. Now, with that right attitude, what we need to do is we need to now get this person talking. Why? Because you already know why you're at the show. This is something we spoke about in our last webinar, which is setting some really good objectives for the whole team. So your manager will have talked to you about what the objective of the show is. You as a team are working there and you know clearly why you're there. So now knowing that means there's another part of the equation that you don't know. Why is the stranger there? Like, what's their objective? And quite frankly, I think it's more important at this point of the conversation to find out what their objective is than just rehash yours. So what we need to do is to get them talking fast. And the best way to do that is by asking them questions. So let me just show you how to open a conversation. I'm going to give you some rules to think about, okay? And then what we'll do after I go through these 6 rules is let me give you some suggestions. Okay, and I'm going to ask you to write them all down, and then I'm going to ask you to pick your favorites. Okay, the ones that you can ask comfortably and honestly at the show. I'm going to ask you to think about what they are, and I'm going to ask you to practice them before you get to Restaurants Canada so that they're just going to run smoothly off your tongue. All right, so here are some of the do's and don'ts of good conversational openers. The don'ts are, here's don't number 1. Don't ask questions if you don't want the answer. Don't ask a question if you don't want the answer. Do you know what the worst approach question is? The very worst one? Okay, here it is. How you doing today? You all heard that one? Of course you have. You walk around a show and you walk up and down the aisles and you got people standing in their booths going, how you doing? How you doing? Right? You've all heard that, right? And what is your reaction? It's often this, fine, and you just keep on walking. You see, this has nothing to do with anything. It's one of those social things we do because we think it's friendly, but in fact, it's anything but. It isn't. Here, I've got a test for you, okay? What I want you to do is anything that we're going to cover in today's webinar, don't believe a word I'm saying. Go check it out. Go to a trade show. Like I said, go to anyone, and what I want you to do is walk up and down the aisles and just mentally count how many people say to you, how are you doing today? And then if you want to check out this rule, here's what to do. Instead of going fine and just walking by, stop and tell them. and watch their eyes glaze over because they weren't expecting you to share with them, how you're doing. They didn't care. It's just a question that's shallow. So rule number 1 says no questions about their health and no questions about the weather. Get away from that stuff. It's meaningless. It has nothing to do with anything. Rule number 2 says, don't ask a question if you don't know what to do with the answer. You see, often when we plan and organize what we're going to do at a show, we think about what can we ask this person, and then we use the comment that they give us as a lead into an answer. But what happens if they give us the wrong answer? If they do, it's so incredibly easy to get stuck. So easy. And so even seasoned people who have been doing trade shows for years and years and years fall into exactly the same trap. They haven't thought about how to deal with an answer that they didn't expect. Let me give you an example. Somebody comes by your booth and you walk up and go, "Hi, are you familiar with our company?" And the person goes, "Yes, I am." And the answer is, "Great." You see, that wasn't the answer they expected. "Have you seen this new machine?" "Yes, I have." "Terrific." You see, that's not the answer they expected. What they expected was a no, so that could go into making a pitch. So think about the questions you're going to ask. Think about what they're going to answer, and make sure you don't get stuck. Rule number 3 says, don't ask a question that leads to a pitch. That dreaded pitch. Now, my guess is you've all been in a pitch at some point. I don't mean giving it, but I mean receiving it. Think about sometime when you were, shopping, or whether you're at a trade show or even you walk into a retail store and you walk up to some clerk and you say, "Tell me about this new suit," or whatever it is you're buying. And before you know it, this retail clerk is just regurgitating everything they ever knew about that particular suit on poor old you. That's all happened to you, hasn't it? You've all had somebody just throwing information at you and just dumping all this stuff on you, hoping something's going to stick. But while that's happening, while you're the recipient of that pitch, what do you really want to do? And my guess is you want to get out of there as fast as you possibly can, right? Well, why do you think any visitor to a trade show is any different than you are? They're not at all. They don't want all of this stuff. And quite frankly, they already know it anyway. If they're interested in your product line, if they're interested in your company, my guess is they've gone and checked you out. Want to hear something really interesting? 73% of all the people who attend a trade show actually attend with an agenda. They've actually thought about who they want to see, what educational sessions they want to attend, what products they want to learn about, and what they've also done is done some research on the internet. I mean, that's one of the huge differences between visitors of today and visitors of 10 years ago, is visitors of today are much better informed, therefore further along on the sales cycle than ever before in history. And if you take one of these visitors who already knows a whole bunch of stuff and just pitch him more stuff, big problem. Even if somebody came to you and said something like this, they walk up to you and said, "Oh, hi, I heard about this product. Can you tell me a little bit about it?" Like, what would you tell them? My guess is you'd go into a pitch and you'd start telling them everything. But who is this stranger? Why do they want the information? How much do they already know about it? What perspective should you be focusing on? Yeah, there's so many questions you don't have answers to. So be careful, because that can be, for you, a huge trap. Okay, so there's some of the things not to do. Here's some of the things to do. Here's some of the do's. Number 1, ask questions that are friendly. You're the host, for heaven's sake, so just be friendly, be outgoing. Go on and chat with these people without having that sales objective playing heavily on your mind. Ask questions that are based on your genuine inquisitiveness, which means you get rid of that silly "how you doing" question and ask questions that you actually care about getting an answer to. And my guess is that if you really care about getting an answer, you'll listen better. If you don't care, if you're just asking by rote, the listening skills go right out the window. Ask questions that are focused on the visitor, not you. And this is crucial, absolutely crucial, because you are working in an environment where you've got too many people in too short a period of time. We've spoken about that. And now you're into a really busy time when there's just tons of people walking by your booth and coming into your booth. You know, it's so incredibly easy to revert back to focusing on you, but the need is exactly the same. Focus on them. Okay, does that make some sense? Good. All right, so what I want to do is, those are the rules. Let me give you some suggestions, some ways of asking, to opening up these conversations to engage somebody in a meaningful conversation. Now, you can write all these suggestions down. They're all yours. You can have everything. Nothing is copywritten today. So you can have all of these suggestions, but the ones that you should use are questions that you can ask comfortably and honestly. You may hear some of my suggestions and go, yuck, I couldn't do that. Well, you know what? Don't. You may hear my words and go, ooh, that doesn't work for me. Well, you know what? Take the idea and mold it into something that does work for you. Because the bottom line is, you've got to be able to ask questions that come from you, not come from me. I can get away with some things when I work a booth. You can get away with other things. It all fits into your personality. So I'm not trying to change you. I'm just trying to get you to do it a little bit better, just a little bit better. So here are some suggestions for you. All right, you're standing in your booth. You're not in the back huddling with your colleagues. What you are doing is you're standing close to the front, and you're going to just stand very comfortably. Don't put a clipboard under your arm. Just stand comfortably and watch the people that are coming by. And every once in a while, you make eye contact with somebody. And as soon as you do, what I want you to do now is to approach that person and get them into a conversation. The best way to start the conversation is walk up to the person and go, hi, I'm Barry Siskin with ABC Company. Now, you can't see what I just did, but what I did was I extended my hand to shake this stranger's hand. Now, I'm going to tell you something else really interesting. 83% of people who work in a trade show booth will not proactively engage somebody in a conversation by shaking their hands. Isn't that interesting? And I have no idea why. And don't tell me it has anything to do with germs. It doesn't. There's something else going on there. Well, just because other people aren't shaking people's hands doesn't make it right. You are not in the product business. You are not in the food business. You're not in the machine business. You're in the people business. And it's all about relationships. All of it. So what I want you to do is to begin this approach by offering to shake their hand. Greet them. It's the beginning of the conversation. And then you follow that up with a question. Hi, I'm Barry Siskin, and I'm with ABC Company. What caught your eye? See, the questions don't have to be tough. They don't have to be really sophisticated. They could be really easy. What attracted you to our booth? Is this your first time at Restaurants Canada? What are you hoping to accomplish today? Have you attended any of the technical sessions? Did you hear the keynote? What's the best booth you've seen so far? You see, all of these questions, and this is just a sampling of questions you can ask, are simple questions. They're focused on the visitor. The answers you're going to get back will probably be pretty interesting because at least we're going to get into some kind of a dialogue, hopefully from the questions. But the trick is to make sure they're questions you can ask. Now, one word of warning, don't ask questions that are totally unrelated to the business at hand. And I use that word business on purpose. You're here for business, they're here for business. So don't go, hey, I really like your jacket. That has nothing to do with anything because you're going to be spending the next 5 minutes talking about this person's tailor and where they went shopping and did they get a deal and la-da-da, and what's that got to do with anything? So don't talk about anything that's not related to business at hand. Talk about the show, talk about their company, talk about their needs, talk about what they're looking for. but create questions you could ask comfortably and honestly. Does that make sense? Good. Okay. Now, that's going to get you in a really good conversation fast. We're going to get them talking, and regardless of what they answer, you will have always thought about where you're going to go next, and just make sure you remember rule number 3, where you go next does not lead them into a pitch. And this is so incredibly easy to fall into the trap of getting into that pitch too soon. Okay. Hi, let me just give you some examples. Hi, what caught your eye? Oh, I saw this new machine over here. The answer here is it isn't, can I tell you all about it? It is, what have you heard? Have you seen it before? Do you know anybody who's using one of these now? You see, that's different than, let me just tell you all about it, and dumping a bunch of information on them. One of the interesting things, another interesting thing about trade show visitors is they all suffer from exactly the same thing. It's called information overload. You know, they come to a show like Restaurants Canada, which is a very substantial show. You've got a ton of exhibitors there. You've got educational sessions. You've got keynote addresses. You've got, you know, all kinds of stuff that's going on. What happens to them happens to every human being on the planet. They just get overloaded with information. The last thing they want is more information that's irrelevant to them. So follow my suggestions in terms of creating good approach questions. Think about them ahead of time, and I would actually spend this pre-show time practicing questions that work for you. And, you know, sit around with some of your colleagues, maybe after this webinar is over with, and just ask each other, like, how would you ask somebody? How would you engage somebody in a conversation? And what you'll get is, I hope, more ideas. Take those ideas, jot them down, and then mold them into questions that work for you. Okay, so that's the first step. Step number 2 is, how do we gather and record information? Well, the first step was just getting into the conversation. What I'm going to ask you to do now is maybe something you haven't done before. But before you go barreling off into giving this person a presentation, what I'd like you to do is ask them questions first without telling them anything. Even if they directly ask you something, what I would suggest you do, how much is this machine? You know, they could ask you that. You can't avoid the answer, so don't. But it's the quick answer. Well, the range of this machine is from X to Y, but before we get into that, I just have a few questions I want to ask you to make sure I'm talking about the right machine. Okay? You see, what you're doing is taking that power back, and it's the power to uncover who this person is and to find out how they fit best into your needs, into your objectives. Don't take any action with anybody unless you know who you're talking to. Now, I'm using that word action on purpose. It's 6 things that I think you need to know in order to know who the person is and how to spend your precious few moments with them. So what I'd like to do is I want to go through those 6 with you. I want to go through the action acronym and go through the 6 things, and I want to tell you, you know, what's behind each, what's the rationale, and I will give you some suggestions on how to ask for each. Write them all down. Remember, the rule here is exactly the same as it was a minute ago. Ask questions that you can ask comfortably and honestly. Now, the other thing about my action acronym is that the order that I go through this with you has nothing to do with reality. It has to do with spelling. I'm going to start with the A word. You certainly won't. You'll start somewhere else. It doesn't matter. The conversation is friendly. It's between 2 people. Let the conversation flow back and forth. That's okay. So the order you put the stuff in doesn't matter. And in another situation, you may have people that you know really well, people you've been dealing with for an awful long time. Maybe you don't need all 6. Well, throw out what you don't need. But what I strongly recommend is you need some sort of a guideline to work with. And that's what I'm trying to present to you now. So let's begin. The A in action stands for authority. This person you're chatting with, do they have the authority to make a decision or to influence a decision? Is that something you need to know? My guess is you bet you do. How are you going to find out? Well, the answer is you ask them a question. Now, the obvious question is, so what's your position in the company? And the person goes, I'm the vice president of purchasing. Well, that's very nice. Do they make the decision or influence it? Technically, they may be able to make it, or they may be able to go back to, present it to somebody else who will say, this is something we ought to buy, and then they go ahead and buy it. The bottom line is we're not sure. And what I want you to do is to know whether or not you're dealing with somebody with the authority to make the decision or somebody with the authority to influence it, because that will influence how you ultimately make the presentation to them. So you don't disengage from either one. That's not what this is about. But what it does mean is that you focus your words correctly on the people you're talking to. So how do you ask? What are the questions? One is, what's your role in the organization? Do you buy this particular product line? Is there anybody else in your organization that might be involved in, our future discussions or demonstrations that we might have? Who bought the last one? Now remember, these are just my suggestions. You may or may not like them, and that's okay. But what I want you to do is think about what could you say that would uncover this person's level of authority. The C in action stands for capability. Now here's how I define capability. Does this stranger have the capability of helping you achieve your objective? Well, what's your objective? Your manager should now have sat down, because we talked about this in the last webinar, and talked to you about what your objective at Restaurants Canada is. So it may include, getting some really good leads to work with later, actually closing some deals now, reinforcing your relationship with the existing customer. Whatever it happens to be, that's the focus. And to repeat what I said to your managers a few weeks ago, just because we're focused on one thing doesn't mean you can't have something else. But what it does is it gives the team a focus. It gives your booth a focus. And it should give you the focus as well. So now you understand what it is we as an organization are trying to accomplish at Restaurants Canada. You should have also had the second part of that conversation, which is, who should we try to accomplish it with? And if you think the answer is all 12,000 people that are coming by, the answer is no. What percentage of that marketplace should you be talking to? Clearly, you should not be talking to everybody. You should not be spending an exorbitant amount of time with everybody. So who is the person that can best help you achieve your objective? And then what I want you to do is ask them simple capability questions. Here's some examples. Tell me a bit about your organization. How many employees do you have? What kind of product lines do you handle now? Are you Canadian? Do you import? Who do you sell to? What kind of things are you looking to do in the future? You see, all of these are capability questions, and what you can do with those capability questions, and it will help you focus on the people that you really ought to be focused on. Remember, not everybody, just the right people. The T in action stands for time. Time. Time's an enemy. Remember, I told you that in the beginning. It's a huge enemy of yours. But what I want you to think about is this. You know your timing. And what I mean by that is your sales cycle. Like, how long does it take you from when you meet a brand new person until they actually make a commitment? Now, I know you'll immediately tell me everybody's different, but what I want you to think about is, on average, how long does it take between you meet somebody new and they actually make a commitment to do something with you? Is it instant? Does it take a day, a week, a month, a year? How long does it take? Every one of you are different. But knowing that average number is your sales cycle. What we are missing in the equation is this stranger's buying cycle. How long does it take them to make the decision? You see, what we want to do when we define the person that we should be talking to, we want to find people who are willing to make a decision within our sales cycle. So how do we do that? We see if there's a match between the sales cycle and the buying cycle. How do we find that out? Simple. Ask them the when question. So when are you considering adding additional capacity to your plant. When would be a good time for you and I to meet at a post-show conference or meeting or something? How soon do you want to do this? Has it been budgeted in this quarter? I mean, those kinds of questions will give you the information you need to know in order to know whether there's a match between sales cycle and buying cycle. Now, if there isn't a match, once again, it doesn't mean you jump to the last step and disengage, but what it does mean is you organize your time properly. If this person is clearly outside of your sales cycle, well, we're talking about doing something like that and expanding our manufacturing and may need a machine like that. Definitely, at some point in the future. But if that point is like 2 or 3 years down the road and your sales cycle is 3 months, see, this person's just dreaming. Take the person, take the lead, work with them outside the show. Don't spend a whole lot of time now because this person isn't ready to hear any more from you now. The I stands for identity. Identity. One of the things you need to know is, who is this person? You need to know their name. You need to know their address and their email address and their, all of that kind of stuff about it. So what you're doing is, yes, you read their badge, and that will be tremendously helpful. Yes, you'll pass business cards, and that will be very helpful. But what you also need to be able to do is to record all of this information. Now, recording it is the trick. You have a choice. At Restaurants Canada, ShowCare, which is a vendor, offers a lead retrieval system. It's the electronic lead retrieval system. If you haven't checked it out, go onto the website. All the information will be there on ShowCare. I like lead retrieval systems a lot. They save you a heck of a lot of time and effort. You have the ability of customizing it somewhat. And if you can save seconds in terms of writing, those are seconds you can spend with this person to develop a better relationship. Those are seconds you can be spending with other people rather than just spending all that time writing. So take a look at the Restaurants Canada website. Take a look under ShowCare and take a look at the electronic lead retrieval system. See if that makes some sense for you. At very least, you should need something manual. And so here's my manual lead card on the side. You see what I've done there? I've got all the action questions down one side. So all you really have to do is, as you're hearing the answers, just record them really quickly. I have a couple of other columns on mine. One says promised follow-up. If you make a promise, write it down, or for sure you're going to forget it. Any comments they gave you that you didn't ask for, these unsolicited things, write them down because for sure you're going to forget it. And the other one, the one on the very bottom is really great because while you've got them in front of you, what you also want to do is you want to put them into your network. But we're in an age of permission-based marketing, which means we need their permission in order to contact them in the future. So ask them, could I put you on our mailing list for our newsletter? Can I send you out invitations to our next trade show? Just ask them. If they say yes, you've got permission. If they say no, you can't. It's as easy as that. So you've got two choices. The ShowCare one, take a look at it, see if it answers your need, something manual, or actually you have a third choice. The third choice is a hybrid. Why don't we do a little of both? Take a look at what ShowCare gives you, and then take a look at what you can't get, and maybe do a manual one afterwards, and then marry those two documents when the show is over with. And now you have a complete picture of this stranger that you have been talking with. To me, this is the bottom line of everything that you guys do at Restaurants Canada. O stands for obstacles. Now, this is something that we don't necessarily want to hear, but we need to early in the conversation. So the question here is, why could this stranger not, or would they not, do what you want them to do? And there are always reasons that get in the way. Maybe they've had some past history with your company. Maybe they can't afford it. Maybe they don't have any budget for it. Maybe they don't have a need for that particular product or service line. I don't know what the obstacles are, but you do. You know what some of the obstacles you face are, and my suggestion is, in the first few minutes of a conversation, ask, find out. Ask, and then you'll know how to deal with them. And I know this may sound like you're dredging up some negative information, but you know what? If there's some reason that they can't or won't do what you want them to do, They know it. You don't. All we're doing is leveling the playing field. So have you ever dealt with our company in the past? Just ask them. Any reason why you couldn't, we shouldn't sit down in the future and have a meeting and go through this product in more detail? Just ask. If there's a reason, they will tell you. And the N stands for need. Now, remember I said this wasn't in order? It isn't. The need is actually the first question, not the last question. And how I use the need question is as a bridge between the conversational opener and this gathering and recording of information stage. So what the need question does is it helps you kind of very gracefully make that transition. So, what attracted you to our booth? Remember, that was the conversational opener. And they say, I saw this brand new machine here. And then you say, have you ever seen one before? You see, that's a need question. What educational sessions have you attended? I went to XYZ. What did you learn? That's the need question. This whole process should take you about 90 seconds. And in 90 seconds, if you are well rehearsed and well thought out, you can determine their level of authority, capability, time, identity, obstacles, and need. And now you are in a perfect position to move on to the next step of the process, which is actually to present something to them. Now, the trick here is to practice this stuff, okay? So what I'm going to suggest you do with your team is sit down and talk to them about the people that are coming to Restaurants Canada. Sit down and have a little briefing ahead of the show, talk about who the people are, and then share back and forth some suggestions on how you would uncover some of these areas about the visitors that are coming to see you. So let me talk to you. You haven't told them anything yet, so now it's time to tell them something. So a couple of the things to think about. Now here is my presentation mantra. My presentation mantra says, when it comes time to tell somebody something, tell them what they want to know rather than what they need to know. Now, do you all understand the difference between wants and needs? Wants are from their perspective. Needs are from yours. And all I'm saying with this simple little mantra is get out of your head and get into theirs. What do they want to know? Well, listen, some people, are coming from finance, so they want to know more about costs and cost savings and that sort of thing. Some people will be coming to you from production, and they want to know more about, production things and downtime and plant time and all that kind of stuff. Other people are from quality control, and they want to know more about, compliance issues and that sort of thing. Like everybody's got their own unique perspective. Doing that one pitch fits all thing just doesn't work. So tell them when it comes time to tell them something what they want to know rather than what they need to know. Well, how do you know what to tell them? Well, the trick to a presentation is something called the Goldilocks effect. Now, you've all read the Nursery Rhyme, of course, but the Goldilocks effect, just like Goldilocks when she went and got the porridge and said it's too hot, it's too cold, this one's just right, your presentation is exactly the same. Not too long. Why? Because they're probably suffering from information overload. The more you tell them, the less they're going to remember, and you don't want to tell them everything anyway. I mean, save some surprises for later. Not too short, because you don't want them to leave with unanswered questions. You don't want them to leave not knowing fully that you can really help them take care of the problems they've come to take care of, but just the right amount. So the question is, how do you know the right amount? And the answer is, add one more question to the qualifying, to that information gathering section. I said 6. Let's do the 7th question. And the 7th question, if you don't know it, I mean, don't do the 7th question, with everybody. If you are still unsure about what their wants are, the 7th question will help you clarify it. So these are just some examples of 7th questions. Remember, once again, you find the questions that work for you. That's really important. So here's just some of my examples. What is most important to you? That's pretty simple. What are you looking for? Why have you chosen this route? What is the perfect solution? How can I make your search easier? Okay, these are really easy questions, and what you're doing is hopefully uncovering enough information so that you can now make a presentation that focuses on what they want it to focus on, and that it follows the Goldilocks effect, which is not too long, not too short, but just right. So once again, when you have this pre-show briefing with your colleagues, I want you to think about some of your 7th questions. What questions might you ask in your particular industry and business that will help you uncover all the wants that this visitor has so that you can address them properly? Okay? Take mine as examples. Add your own, but remember, the trick is ask questions you're comfortable with, questions you can ask honestly and actually care about getting answers to. Well, now what do we do? What do we do now? And the answer is we've got to get out of the conversation. I mean, you've presented what you wanted to present. You've gathered information from them. You've whet their appetite by telling them what they want to know, not what they need to know. Conversation's over with. You see, what's happened now is that along the way, you've been building rapport. I mean, this conversation back and forth, there's certain chemistry that happens. At this point of the conversation, once you've done your job, it's really difficult sometimes to say, whoops, let's stop this and move on. And for sure, the visitor doesn't know how to do it. So once again, what I'm suggesting is you have a choice. Okay, you can be proactive or reactive. You can wait for the visitor to do it. They don't know how, or you can do it, and you will know how. Let me just show you some things to think about in terms of a good disengaging strategy. There's parts to a disengaging strategy. The 3 parts are you need to refocus the conversation. Part 2 is called the setup, and part 3 is called the proposition. The proposition. So let me just show you how this one works, okay? Now, what I'd like to recommend to you as a team is that you actually think about your disengaging strategies and what can you do to get out of conversations that are uncomfortable. One of the ways to disengage is by actually giving this visitor something. How many of you have promotional products at your booth? Pens, mouse pads, USB port things, I mean, all of those giveaways, they're great. They're really great. They have a tremendous value. If you are planning on giving out something, then what I would suggest is that rather than just putting them out on your counters, you hide them. Don't use them to help you get into a conversation. Use them to help you get out of one. And when you do, you give it value. So let's just okay, so if you don't have a promotional product, don't worry about it. I'll show you what to do. But if you do have a promotional product, what I'm suggesting you do is hide it, put it away. Okay? Let's just assume for a moment that you are giving away pens. You've actually got pens. You've got your website or a URL or something burned onto the barrel of the pen, and it's time to get out of a conversation. So here's how I would use your pen. Okay? Now watch or listen to what I'm saying, because what I'm going to do is not only surprise the visitor. What I'm going to do is give him the promotional product, and I'm going to give the promotional product value by telling the visitor what to do with it. Watch. Step number 1 is called the refocus. You see, I've approached, which meant I got him into a conversation. I gathered information. I made the presentation. I told him what he wanted to know, not what they needed to know, and we followed the Goldilocks effect, and we did all of that kind of stuff correctly. We're into a really nice conversation now. I've got what I need. I've got the lead. I've got the sale. I've got whatever the heck it is that I need. I've got it. I've accomplished it. I can't go any further. I need to now go to the last step, which is to disengage. What I will not say in the refocus, this is the question not to do, okay? Do not turn to this person and say, got any more questions? Is there anything else I can tell you? Don't do that. You're just looking for more stuff, and who needs it? You've already spent a whole lot of time with this person. So a better approach would be to refocus the conversation and say something like this. Thank you so much for dropping by our booth today. I'm really glad we've had this time to chat. You hear the difference? I've stopped presenting and I'm now doing something else. Step number 2 is called the setup. The setup. And what I'd like you to think about doing is take complete responsibility and say something like this. I know I've taken up so much of your time today and you're anxious to see the rest of the show. See, you took responsibility. I know you're interested in going to that next presentation and it looks like it's going to start in a couple of minutes. You want to get a good seat. I don't want to keep you from that. You take responsibility. That's okay. And step number 3 is the proposition, where I'm going to give him my promotional pen. So here to start to finish. And I got the pens in my jacket pocket or somewhere, right? Just somewhere I can grab them quickly. So what I say to this person, thank you so much for dropping by. I'm really glad we had an opportunity to talk about your situation today. I know we've talked about a lot and I've kept you so long, and I know you're anxious to see the rest of the show. But before you go, for all of our visitors today, we put together this special promotional pen. This new product that you were thinking about, the URL is right on the barrel here. Now, I'm going to follow up with you next week, and we'll see what other questions you have, and we'll put together our engineer so we can come and do a demonstration. But come on into our website or go onto this URL and see if there's anything else that we can talk about in our follow-up conversation. Thank you so much for dropping by today. Shake their hand, move away. See what you've done? You've impressed them. You've given them a present they didn't think they were going to get. The present has value because you told them what to do with it, and now you are free to talk to somebody else. Now, don't worry if this person goes, yes, but I want to know, because if they do, you got to tell them. Then once you've told them, disengage. Okay? It doesn't mean they get a second pen. They only get one. So that's how you get out of a conversation. Now, what if you don't have a promotional product? What I'm going to suggest you do here is use your business card. Thanks so much for dropping by. I'm glad we had a chance to talk. Yes, I will follow up with you next week with that information that you're looking for. Here's my card. If you have any other questions before we have a chance to get back to you and put that proposal together, please don't hesitate to give me a call. Here's my number. See? Promotional products are good and your business card is good. But without a disengaging strategy, what happens often is that we get stuck. We just get stuck and we just don't know how to get out of a conversation. And it happens so often. So don't let them, don't force them into wanting to leave you. Let's make it easy. Okay, and once again, let's go back to the host, right? If you're hosting people at your house, for example, you don't just spend all evening with one person. You kind of flit around, talk to as many people as you want, as you can, and introduce one person to the next person and all that. Your job is the same here. Spend the appropriate amount of time with some person, move on, talk to somebody else. The sheer beauty of Restaurants Canada is all about your ability to talk to as many people as you possibly can. That's what it's all about. All right. Now, let me just talk to you about some little stuff, okay? All that we've talked about has been great. All this talk about is going to help you hone your existing skills to work in a very high-pressure environment like Restaurants Canada. Nothing that we've talked about has been rocket science, but what it all requires are a new outlook on your interpersonal skills. It needs some practice. It needs some time to be integrated. So what I want you to do as you're trying to integrate this for yourself, if you're trying to make the changes, is take them one at a time. Be slow about it. Just practice one thing at a time, and because nobody's going to be, you can't go from A to B and expect a massive change overnight. It happens in small incremental chunks. So work as a team, give each other some coaching, give each other some feedback. And once again, I just want to repeat, even for those of you who have been doing this for an awful long time, shows like Restaurant Canada are not the same today as they were yesterday. They've changed, and the primary change is the people who come to the show. You cannot continue to do the same thing over and over and over again and expect different results. Well, you all know where that one came from, right? So you've got to change. All I'm suggesting you do is take a look at what you do, hone those skills you have, to work in this environment. So let's just talk about a few little things and then we will wrap up. So one of the things to remember is to be engaging. Okay, it's all about being the host. Just go on out there and welcome people to your place of business. And that's what your booth at Restaurants Canada is all about. Dress appropriately. Now, here's what I would consider good dress. What you should wear shows your sense of professionalism. Now, I have no idea what that means, okay? But what I think it means is that whatever you would wear to make a visit to a client between Monday and Thursday would be appropriate to wear at a show. If in fact you guys are wearing theme costumes, you know, where everybody's got the same shirt or jacket or sweatshirt or bandana or something, I like that a lot and I think that's absolutely fabulous. So if you all wear the same thing, it's great because now you look like a team. It's really easy to figure out who to be talking to because we know how to differentiate one from the next. You're walking billboards when you walk around. And just know that you don't just have to wear t-shirts. I mean, it could be anything, absolutely anything, as long as it meets two things, right? It's good quality and it's gender and physique neutral. You know, everybody should be comfortable wearing it. And if you are getting your staff to wear theme clothing, I would now make it mandatory, not optional, but mandatory. Everybody wears, you know, this jacket with black pants and a white shirt, you know, so everybody looks the same. You can't just do for some and not for others. Another thing to think about is maintaining a high level of professionalism. You know, if you're wearing themed clothing and you're walking around the show, you're a walking billboard, that's true, but even in off time, you're still wearing the same clothes. Even if you're not wearing themed clothing, you've got a badge on, for heaven's sakes. I would just be careful, very careful, about conversations you have in the washroom, conversations you have at a coffee line. You never, ever know who's listening. When you work a show like Restaurants Canada, you are in a fishbowl, and you never have a chance to be less than professional because you just don't know who's listening. Another thought to you is to be prepared to answer tough questions. Now, I don't know what the tough questions are in your business, but you do. One of the things I would do in this briefing that I have alluded to a number of times is I would think about what are some of the tough questions we have to face, and as a team, come up with some answers ahead of time so that when you are faced with these questions, you will know then what to do. Create a schedule. You know, don't have, if you have a 10 by 10 booth, I don't want to see 4 of you working the booth. I want to see 2 of you. Like, don't overcrowd the booth and give people time off. For heaven's sakes, you know, 2 to 3 hours is probably enough. Go get some fresh air, get some coffee, give somebody else a chance to work the booth. Like, create a schedule ahead of time and adhere to it. So the steps we've covered today are: you need to get ready for the challenge, you need to approach visitors, uncover their needs, record the information, keep your presentations relevant, that's by telling them wants and not needs, doing the Goldilocks thing, disengage, and just remember the little stuff. And if you can do all of that, and if you can improve the human resources at a show like Restaurants Canada, your results will be spectacular. That's a promise from me to you. Now, unfortunately, I didn't have enough time to get to all the questions, so there's my email address. That's my book, but there's my email address at the bottom. If there's any other questions that come up that didn't get answered and you go, oh, gee, I really wish I had asked Barry, just email me your questions and I will get answers back to you as quickly as I possibly can. So I want to thank Joyce for organizing this today, and I want to thank all of you for being part of this today, and I want to wish you the very best of luck at Restaurants Canada. It's a great show. You'll do really well. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.